they might be self-aware.
Welcome back to another episode of They Might Be Self-Aware. I am your host, Hunter Powers, joined by the other
co-host, Daniel Bishop.
Daniel
Hello.
Bishop. How's it going, Daniel?
Truth be told, I'm a little under the weather.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, just one of those things going around. Not COVID.
Did you chat GPT your symptoms?
Yeah, and just like, everyone who's been searching on WebMD previously says I've got turbo cancer and, things like that. So it's curtains for me.
We're trying to go a little less doom and gloom on this episode of AI and its inevitable conclusion.
AI and medicine, it seems like a natural fit, right? There's a lot of data, and machine learning really seems like a good, marrying of the two things put together.
There's been studies where models have performed as well as people who've been trained for years and years on doing things like reading radiology scans.
Yeah. Yep. There are multiple companies that are popping up all over the place doing radiology, dermatology, looking at slides, able to tell if something's a melanoma better than a trained individual, that kind of thing. And I think it's starting with a bunch of small individual, this one specific disease, but maybe at some point it becomes much more of a catch-all. WebMD becomes an AI, and then you can ask it and it will give you actual, advice or diagnoses.
I know I've read some anecdotal reports of people like putting all their symptoms into a ChatGPT, or even taking actual lab results and like punching them into ChatGPT and then sort of exploring them through their data explorer and coming up with some novel prognosis that they then take to their physician, and it's that they've been correct. I don't know, when you have the world's information to leverage.
Yeah, I didn't have anything particularly wrong with me, but blood work. I went in, I had like a liver something done, and I didn't know what any of the numbers and terms meant. And so I just plugged that into ChatGPT and like, hey, what's this number? And what's this, not word next to it? Oh, well, that's the range of the such and such. And like, it was at least informative. And then knowing what each of those terms was, I was able to look them up because I don't think that we're at a point where you should trust it, certainly for anything medical. But honestly, it did a very good job of like, oh, that's what this test is called, and here's where these, specific terms come from, which was really neat. It helps take jargon and make it more approachable to people, which I think is a really nice use of this.
Just Eli 5 your way to success.
Yeah, or at least stumbling your way through life where you see a bunch of stuff that up until now, you'd say, I wonder what that meant. Well, I guess I have to move on with my life. Now you can actually ask, if not an expert all the time, something who's vaguely aware of what each of these is and can point you in the right direction.
It's just, it's challenging to get past that hallucinating fact when leveraging a large language model in the context of the medical space.
We're not even at a trust but verify. It's a don't trust, definitely verify.
Speaking of don't trust but definitely verify, something we've been following here is one of OpenAI's next models, Sora. That's the text to video generation. We saw the the woolly mammoth, the dogs podcasting, the woman walking down the street of Tokyo. I don't know. There were a number of different examples. Pretty revolutionary stuff. You took a look at some of the current sort of state-of-the-art commercial solutions, which seem to be trailing pretty far behind it.
So far. Maybe that'll change. But it looks like OpenAI is going to at least hold on to that lead for a while in a public sense, not just soliciting requests on Twitter and sending one or two through a day, because they're posting new videos all the time, which is neat. But it looks like Sora is supposed to be publicly available later this year.
I assume I should say publicly available means that there is a sign-up list that you can sign up for that few people will have access to under very specific constraints, just because that's how they tend to roll things out.
Sure.
And I'm guessing general availability, which we'll call sometime next year.
I think that that's a fairly safe bet. I know that they're already doing what they call red hatting or red testing, something along those lines, where it's people who are doing their darndest to get it to make some very bad stuff so that they know what not to have it make. Presumably, the small number of people who are allowed in for open access are going to be very heavily monitored at first.
How much do you think it will cost? So they're showing us like generating these HD quality clips that are 3 minutes long. How much do you think is it going to cost? Like $1?
I don't think it's going to be built
$100?
into just the ChatGPT $20 a month model. I think it's absolutely something different. It's also not fast at this time. One of the things that I read said making a video, like one small video, takes time. Which, granted, if you were to make any kind of artificially generated video using Blender, whatever, I'm not a visual person. Like, I don't know these pieces of software, but I do know it takes time to render this stuff.
Yes.
It takes time for OpenAI too. So we've gotten used to ask GPT for something and it starts responding a second or two later.
Mm-hmm.
That is not the case here. So
Price,
it's
though.
a whole new mode of people interacting.
How much?
With it.
Place your bet. How much do I
Okay.
pay for a 3-minute clip?
I'm
HD.
going to say, so with GPT-4, they're putting it behind, like, you can do X number of messages a minute or an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just so-and-so dollars a month. I think it's 20. I expect that they'll stick to a number of dollars per month and that you can do 5 a day, 10 a day, something like that. But it's going to be an add-on to ChatGPT. Like, you'll have to have a ChatGPT subscription, and then for an extra $50 a month, you get 10 generations a day, something like that. I expect that this will be a, what's the term, loss leader or something like that at first. Like, they, in terms of the GPU cost and so on, I bet that they're going to release it without making money from this to start, hoping that by version 2, it's fast enough where they start earning off of it.
Okay, so you're assuming it will be part of ChatGPT, maybe as an add-on, but it'll be rolled into that package. See, I'm sort of assuming that it's something separate, just because it feels like it feels like it'll be expensive, just because like the knowledge of what has to happen for it to work, and that therefore they would like limit it to a professional class. But I guess
so my $50 a month, like you think it's going to be north of that and totally separate.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an API that you can access, and maybe there's a UI behind it, but just part of chat that everyone has ChatGPT today can start generating these HD clips. Now, maybe there's another model where they can generate much lower resolution, much shorter clips within ChatGPT, and then they can kind of pay to you want to up-res that.
So runway.ml, like we did the comparison videos using them. There's also Pika Labs. I've played around a little bit with them. I feel like for Runway, whenever you want to generate something for free without using your credits that you end up, you pay for like X number of credits and so seconds of video is XYZ number of credits. I think you're allowed to get like a first frame, basically just a text to image, like that's for free. And then you get maybe 4 of them and you can say, this is the one that I want you to build the video off of, or just put in the text and say, make the video. Maybe kind of like DALL-E 3, we'll start with, here's the first frame of the video and here's 4 different versions of it. Pick the one that you would want and you can go from there. So like, is it a free leads into price? Is it you can get a lower resolution or get it faster? Midjourney for image generation has a fast mode. And it uses more of its credits or number of GPU hours or whatever the pricing scheme is for them. But like there's a fast mode and there's a slow mode. There used to be, I think, like a really slow mode where it was either really, really cheap or free, or it could get you extra credits or something.
Yeah,
like
the
that.
really slow is free.
Right. So maybe there's going to be something like that for Sora. I don't think they'll have a free version. But yeah, there's probably going to be a few sliders of if you don't mind waiting longer, you get put into the slower queue, but it costs half as much, something like that.
In OpenAI's defense, they have had some very surprising pricing, and surprising in a good way. Like they tend to have really competitive low prices, and then they tend to slash those already competitive low prices, which it makes you wonder, like, can they actually be making money doing this, or this is just a loss leader against their billions?
The whole thing's a loss leader.
The whole thing's a loss leader.
Microsoft just wants to have them under the umbrella, and it could be that. I mean, we don't know if this is literally all being subsidized. Maybe all of the money being put into ChatGPT in terms of subscriptions still has them 100 million in the hole per month.
I don't know. I mean, we did say what is it, like 35 million paying users. Mm-hmm. So if they're paying, so it's like $20.
I think so. I think it's about 20.
I think that would cover the server bill.
The first version of GPT-4, and maybe even the 3.5 and 3 and so on. The first versions of those were slower and probably more expensive to run, if only by virtue of it takes more GPU time to run one of these things. They've made it more efficient for time. They've made it a lot faster. So one of the reasons why they're dropping the price is to stay ahead of any competition, sure. But it's also because they've made it more efficient on their end. So I suspect that at this point, no way of knowing, unless I were to Google it, that GPT-4 is profitable at this point. But if I were a betting man, I'd say version 1 wasn't. Version 1 of 4, GPT 4.0, whatever.
Another thing that probably was not profitable from its first version is the Apple Vision Pro, as they were rumored to have invested billions and billions in this spatial computing future. But I guess perhaps now it's found its first valid use case. There was an article about the first surgeon that used it, and he wore his... Now, would you be okay if you walked into the surgery room and there's the woman or man wearing a Vision Pro ready to cut you open? Does that give you confidence, or...
So the article didn't say that it was the surgeon. It was one of the nurses, and they were using it to keep track of like where in the surgery you are. They're using software called exex.ai is the company. And if you look at the very slick homepage, it shows a person wearing a HoloLens, I'm pretty sure, like on the thing. But, you know, they'll start using promo videos with the Vision Pro, and there's a floating window of like, here's where you are in the surgery, and here's how long, here's how much of so-and-so fluids we have. Isn't that what we already have in hospitals? And I say that in a positive way for the Apple Vision Pro or the HoloLens or so on. There's currently 15 beeping machines in the room, each of which shows a number or a graph or a whatever. Wouldn't that be better to all be just like at the periphery of a person's vision put into them? Turns out I don't know what doctors do, but I think, you know, turn it into a heads-up display instead of I have to wheel over to this machine, which is way away from the patient because there's only so much room around them. I see this as potentially a huge boon.
I think yes, in the augmented sense, but when it's a VR headset, I'd get really worried about what happens when that headset clicks off, it freezes. There's some lag that's introduced. Like
My headset reset during the demo that I took. So you're cutting into someone's femoral artery or whatever, and then boop, turns black.
A little lag is introduced. It goes black. Something pops up. Again, in an augmented context where the worst case scenario is closer to I'm just back to real life. Yes, I'm not sure whether I could feel confident about a surgeon leveraging a VR headset during.
So if you're the FDA, you say, I'm not clearing this unless if the thing snow crashes, to use a cyberpunk term.
Yeah.
I'm reading the book right now. If the thing completely dies on you, it would have to like immediately go to I can see through the headset. That's what you want. So that's more of the HoloLens, which has see-through lenses with a thing like projected onto it.
I mean, I would also want to know that my doctor wasn't playing Goat Simulator 3 during the surgery, because when you're using Apple Vision, you have no idea what the person is doing. But when it's an augmented, you at least can see that sort of outlines on the displays. I mentioned
Goat Simulator. Google taught one of their DeepMind models to play that, right?
Yeah, it's the latest in their, what are they called? SIMA, Scalable, Instructable, Multi-World Agent. But it's this sort of generic, well, I'll use the word generalized agent that can attack all sorts of different problems, which they model.
Go wasn't good enough. They had to go to Goat.
Goat 3. I did some research. So I've played Goat Simulator, but I can remember when. I think I played it on mobile, and then probably not for very long. But it's actually been around for 10 years.
It's a wild game.
Yeah, and apparently they skipped 2 and went straight to 3, which came out relatively recently. I did not dive into the new features of 3 versus 2. I don't know if you have any details there.
I've not played since the original Goat Simulator either, but I remember it being an absolutely bonkers game. Really
apparently
fun.
It's very popular with the AI agents.
Yeah, so we've talked about AI coming for our jobs. What happens once we take recreation and automate that away? Do I care if an AI can relax better than me? I don't think so. I'm going to play video games. Like there are competitive games. There's ones that are designed to be chill, or they're puzzles to help you feel like you're working out your brain. Sudoku games, very simple, but like those are huge. There's algorithms. They're like, it could be a machine learning model, it could be just some state machine, whatever. Like Sudoku presumably can be solved by a computer basically instantly. I don't care that it's better at it than me. The point of me playing the game is for my own improvement or my own fun or whatever. I think that's interesting that Google was able to do that. And like whenever they beat the human grand champions or whatever at Go, like it's a showcasing of the technology. I don't think they're coming for this particular job.
No, it's about getting them ready to come into the real world.
Sure.
So the video game is used as a proxy for the real world. You're dropped into Goat Simulator
3D space.
You don't, Goat Simulator 3. We need to be very clear. Goat Simulator 3, and you've got to figure out how do I live in this world, and how do I prosper in this world. And so you start figuring out what are the rules, what are the rewards, how do I level up, leveraging all of your knowledge of everything. So that's one of the novelties. There have been agents that play video games and play video games really well, but historically they take a long time to figure it out. And I mean a really long time, simulated, thousands and thousands of years of playing Super Mario Brothers before they can play it competently.
For this, with the Google DeepMind, like it didn't have a thousands and thousands of hours. They just said, never having seen Goat Simulator before, but a bunch of other games. Here's this one.
Yes.
Oh, okay. That's more impressive.
And so the application is eventually they drop this same model into
a real goat,
a robot body, a robot goat, and they let it loose, and it makes sense of our world. And
well, the Boston Dynamics dog, that with some horns, I mean, it's basically the same thing, right?
Yes, and they own Boston Dynamics.
Well, good news then. We're going to see the Boston Dynamics dog robots with horns strapped onto them, like Viking horns, like with the helmet and everything, going around doing, again, haven't played Goat Simulator 3, but I know the sort of stuff you do in Goat Simulator. It's not quite like a Terminator apocalypse, but it's not great for the people who are going to go up against this particular
It's about creating
goat.
a lot of chaos. That's what it rewards.
It's going to get a lot of points.
Reward
because
function.
That's the reward function that it's going for.
The reinforcement learning.
Yeah, it's going to reinforce some stuff.
That's the logical conclusion.
At least it's not Mario, because we don't want robots stomping turtles. It's bad for the environment.
Does seem plausible.
That was too long of a pause. Do you want robots to stomp turtles?
No, I don't. But I was thinking that it does seem plausible that something like this model could get loaded onto the dog robot that they have from Boston Dynamics, and that it just kind of escapes. Robot. It escapes one night.
All you have to do is teach it. I can't even. There's got to be a bunch of video games where you're escaping from a prison or from some facility or something. All you have to do is somebody loads up into the robot. You're now playing this game, and it still is seeing through electronic eyes or whatever, whether it be a layer on top of like Unity running the game or something, or robot eyes.
Right. Well, we see stories about, an animal escapes from the zoo and causes some chaos, or maybe it just stops traffic or something like that. I do buy that there is a not terribly far away future where a robot escapes, and maybe it doesn't cause just not killing everyone, but it's causing some traffic jams and a little bit of damage.
Baby's big day out. There's the scene where like the robot's teetering on the I-beam being held over a construction site, and
we already have some robots that are, traversing our everyday life, food delivery robots that, going down sidewalks, and some of the robo taxis, but they're not trying to be autonomous. And that's right. The difference here.
Well, I mean, aren't they? Like Waymo's got robo taxis, and they're going to come out into Austin soon. And they're in at least San Francisco. I think they might be in a couple other places in California.
Did they get kicked out of San Francisco?
I mean, everyone's gotten kicked out of there at some point, right? But I don't know where Waymo currently is. Like they've gotten cleared in some other places. So we've got. You said not trying to be autonomous. Isn't that literally the purpose of like the Waymo taxis, is to remove people entirely at some point from the equation?
Well, yes, but within like a very specific context. And I don't think that the model that's being dropped into Goat Simulator has that sort of same context. Like my only job is to transport humans down these paths. These are like the 4 things I can do. The agent that's being
Mixture
deployed
of experts. The
into
Mistral
Goat
folks,
Simulator is do whatever you want, right?
Yeah. Well, do whatever you want, but like in ways that get you points. I think there's like a point system in at least the original Goat Simulator. So it all comes down to the reward function. I keep using that term. Like in machine learning, you make a model and it's trying to just maximize this number. For people, it could be happiness or wealth or whatever combination of things. And it's just some number that the machine learning model is trying to maximize. If you have a really big ML model, call it your GPT-4s or alike, or a mixture of a bunch of these things that all kind of falls under one umbrella. GPT-4 allegedly probably isn't literally just one model, or it's one model that has a bunch of different like sub-models kind of under it. Do the same thing with the Goat Simulator model and the Robotaxi and the Robot Surgeon, and just say, to maximize the reward, figure out which of these many scenarios you're in, and just maximize for that one, instead of like a global thing. And I think we talked a couple episodes ago about X% of people, Y% of the time, and Z% of circumstances. That's the same thing. Outside of ChatGPT, it'll be for the robot dog or the robot surgeon or the robot taxi of, I'm supposed to be as happy, the high reward function, whatever is possible. And so that's drive a person without having any crashes, knock over people like a goat would, perform surgery without the person dying or suing you for medical malpractice, or identify the thing or help determine the fluid levels accurately, whatever the thing ends up being. But these models will keep getting bigger and more capable, and they'll just start folding in more of those use cases, especially as we get into a robot that can like walk around in the real world. Same thing as telling a person you did this task correctly or this other task correctly. Me doing the dishes and me folding laundry are both chores, but they're wildly different in terms of like literally what you do.
So Waymo is coming to Austin. You live near Austin?
Austin adjacent. Would
you take a robotaxi?
I've asked myself this question so many times. I used to live in San Francisco, and I saw the very first robo taxis, I guess you could call it, going around while they definitely still had people in them. Yeah. There were a couple of robo semi type startups. One was really close to like where I used to live. Right. I like to think of myself as a techie. I like tech stuff. I like the progress of these various technologies. But I don't know if I would get into a robo taxi without a lot of education behind it. And education being, we have stats that are verifiable, third-party, whatever, that show you are less likely to be in a harmful accident in this than you would in real life. Because, and it should be a 50.1% to 49.9%, oh, this is literally the safer option, I'll take it. But I don't think that's how people work. Like, I have a Tesla Model 3, and there are some stats of like there's so many accidents on autopilot per million miles versus like people who'd get into accidents per however many miles. But for full self-driving, which is the robotaxi dream,
right? This isn't like the Tesla where there is a person up there and they're kind of touching the steering wheel every now and then. There's no one in the driver's seat,
right? So if you were to say across every situation, snow, rain, fog, people running across the street, someone placed a cone on your windshield and that doesn't make the car, every scenario, you could say literally you're going to have less accidents in the robot taxi than you would in a real taxi. What we should do is say, okay, obviously real taxis immediately stop being a thing. We should go 100% on this because it's going to be less deaths per year. Like numbers wise, that would make sense. But that's not how people work. It's got to be 75-25 or 90-10 or 99-1 before from a regulatory perspective.
All right, there's people, but then there's you. What's your threshold? How much better?
For me, I think I'm probably I'll give you 60-40. I don't think I'm going to wait to the 75-25. If there's stats, if they can really show to me, you're less likely to be because I don't care if I'm being driven by a person versus this. Oh, it's $5 cheaper for the. Yeah. I don't care about that. I'd not want to be in one that is less safe than being in a human-driven thing. And I don't think I'd want it to be by a small margin. because that small margin is going to include empty stretches of road where it's going on a highway and there's only so many things that could happen. I want to make sure that they say, like, city driving, there's construction, a baby toddles out into the street. You know, there's a lot of questions to answer and a lot of edge cases to worry about. I'd want a bunch of those ironed out before I'm getting into one personally.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm the target audience for that too. So maybe it's already there. I just need to be told and reassured, not just, yeah, it's safe. Like, no, here's the stats, third party so-and-so. Otherwise I'm out.
I only need it to like convince me that it's a little bit better than a little bit safer.
50.1.
However, there's another thing is I need that prime directive that its number one goal is to keep me safe. And if it doesn't have that, like, I'm not going to do it. Well, it's like the old, you know, they ran all the exercises. It's going, the car's going, I'm in the back seat, the car's going down the road. 20 old ladies go into the street, and it can either run them all over or drive me into a brick wall. Which should it do? There's 20 old ladies. Like, if I'm going to do it, I need to be able to turn that knob and say, you preserve your passenger first. You're not going to choose my demise. It may happen through accident, but you will do everything in your power to stop it, even though the other consequences might be worse. Because if I had a human driver, I would assume that. Not everyone would do that, but I would at least, like, there's someone fighting for their own life there. I don't want the machine doing it.
I think that at least broadly I would agree with you there. Or, like, maybe everyone should be able to move the slider on the app of, like, 100% it's me, even if I'm bowling over a whole orphanage, versus, you know, I'll take the cliff over the squirrel.
Yes.
Like, that, you know, there's a whole range of what would be acceptable, and everyone has their own place on that sort of line. But, you know, there's a fun website where it gives you a bunch of increasingly weird and specific trolley car problems. And that's what you're describing. It's the trolley car problem. For a self-driving car, I think most people, when it really comes down to brass tacks, would rather have the car protect them.
There were some people working on self-driving or self-flying cars for a while because their airspace is supposedly a much easier problem to solve, but I guess they're just too expensive.
Yellow lines to go over.
One of the first guys from Google who led their self-driving car program, Sebastian Thrun, I believe is his name. He started a big self-flying car thing, but it just never took off. I don't know. I guess it's too expensive and there's too many regulations. Technology's just not there yet. But there certainly are advancements in flying and spaceships, and we had another launch from SpaceX this week. Anything significant to note there?
This one made it to orbit, which is really incredible, and had some great video coming back from it. The parts didn't all survive. It didn't have the soft landings. But in terms of a third flight making this much progress, I think it was very exciting. I'm really, really excited to see sort of where Starship is, literally and figuratively, over the next couple of years. But they're making a lot of progress.
They tend to come out with very positive press releases after their ships suffer, I don't know, technical difficulties, whether they some have blown up.
Unplanned disassembly.
Yeah, unplanned disassemblies, and this one, didn't make it back to its launch pad, or I guess they don't go to a launch pad; they go to a separate place where, in theory, they're going to like land. So
I think
that
they're
they can be
shooting for
reused.
the Indian Ocean on this one.
Yeah, that didn't happen, and I know there's also some controversy during their checklist. I guess a number of things were flagged as things that they needed to remediate. And they fought back on a number of those and won. And there was like an agreement to, I think there's like something like originally 63.
Oh, for the FAA?
Yes, there were 63 things that were flagged, and they negotiated it down to 17. We'll remediate these 17 issues before launching it up.
I didn't know you could negotiate on that kind of thing.
Yeah, apparently.
Well, so the thing made it to orbit.
Okay.
It tested opening it and closing its like payload doors, I think in space, and it tested fuel transfer. I don't know from what to what, because like there was just the one ship up there. It was probably from one part of the ship to another part. But that was one of their big goals, and I think there was like a $50 million extra payout to show that happened from NASA. So, like, they accomplished a lot of goals and learned a lot by launching this thing, even if the ship ended up being sacrificed. The pod bay doors, HAL, and they tested the fuel transfer, and they got like a $50 million bonus, all of which sounds like a successful set of tests. Like, so it didn't land. It flipped over, whatever, burned up in the atmosphere. But overall, like, they accomplished a lot of presumably what they were testing for. And if they say that this one was a success by all but the last of the couple of metrics, I'm inclined to believe them.
And what's the goal? Where are they trying to? Are they trying to take payloads to the International Space Station, or is this about going to Mars? Is there an end goal here, or is it just about making a better spaceship?
Musk seems pretty gung-ho for Mars, and I think I actually mentioned this book on our last-ish episode, A City on Mars by Zach and Kelly Weinersmith. Absolutely worth a read. We'll send a link. A City on Mars, a book by Zach and Kelly Weinersmith. We'll put a link into the notes. They talk about a lot of the trials and tribulations that aren't just get people to the location, that are like really important for having a colony on Mars or on the moon. Artemis and NASA, they're sort of focused on the moon right now. Musk is like, we're going to put 100 people at a time on Mars. But 100 people at a time, wow, that's way more than, every other movie has showed, like, one little ship is going to have like 2 dudes pop out. So the amount of stuff that you could bring, humongous. Like, if this works, if it goes anywhere like Musk has been claiming that it will, this is absolutely humongous. It is also not a city on Mars. It is not a permanent population. Even if you were to take one entire trip per day, completely forgetting, transfer windows and so on, 100 people per day doesn't get you even to like a small city size for a very long time. We'd have to have a zillion starships to have a quote unquote colony. Even if you want something that's completely dependent on Earth, let alone, I believe it's Musk's dream to say, like, it's basically a backup planet, completely not reliant on anything going on Earth. In the book, they talk about how the moon straight up doesn't have a lot of the like materials that we would want. There's barely any water, but also like the physical makeup of the regolith that is the moon's surface and presumed, however far down subsurface, like that stuff isn't super usable outside of a few different types of things. We're not going to be able to bootstrap up a whole economy or ecology. Same thing with Mars. Besides temperature, besides lack of a lot of atmosphere, I don't remember the term of it. There's like a specific kind of chemical in the soil that is basically poisonous. And so we'd have to figure out a way to clean that out. And it also is missing these other kinds of materials that would make it easy to have a self-sufficient thing. You'd need a full, huge city to have all the manufacturing facilities. So much of what's going to be on the moon and Mars is going to have computers. Building a multi-billion-dollar fab for chips on Earth is a gigantic deal that has so many industries that feed into it. Having to build something like that on Mars, if you want to truly be actually independent, forget agriculture, forget, mining for platinum or whatever. Building a chip fab on Mars requires a zillion people. To answer your question, where's he going with this? Yeah, it's get people to Mars, get people to the moon. The dream is a city. I think that city's a long ways off because you need so many people to try and get to that point.
Yeah, we send the autonomous goat up and let it wreak havoc and create some grass. And,
reward function. Make a city. Just let it go nuts.
Yeah, I mean, what's the worst that could happen?
Do you think... Okay, this is a bit of a tangent, but there are extremely expensive, many layers of... like backups and fail-safes of the rovers that are put onto the moon and Mars and so on. Like I don't remember the name of which one it is, but like the big one that's on Mars is like the size of an SUV, which is sort of crazy to think about. Are we going to put... When I say AI, I mean something like an LLM into it. There's probably some sort of machine learning underlying, like it determining what angle to move the wheels to get over a rock or something. But like, are we going to get to a point where maybe because of Starship, it's cheap enough to be like, to hell with it. We took, a big Fisher Price, one of those little kid mobiles with the red and the like yellow top over it, and we slapped an LLM in it and told it to start roving around and take some pictures. Maybe not quite so cheap as that, but like, are we going to get to a point where we don't have to be as careful about what goes to Mars and let things be more exploratory?
I mean, I guess first we need to get some regular travel going to Mars, which is not really a thing. Right. We had the rover, but there haven't really been too many more successful missions to deploy semi-conscious or just sort of machinery in general to that vicinity. Yeah, if you were going to if you were build the next rover to send up, I would assume you would want it to have the ability to operate highly independently and perhaps in some scenarios take over for itself. Hey, if you lose all communication with Earth for more than this period of time, use your solar to charge up and do what you think is best and report back when you get a chance.
Yeah, it'll never be, well, never. It won't be as capable as like a person who's stranded in that scenario. You know, there's plenty of material out there about that kind of triumph of mankind. You've got your Apollo 13s and so on. But I think giving a degree of independence outside of just like a safe mode, because there's plenty of stories that show, oh, this satellite went out and it was like in a safe mode back on the States or, you know, ground side, we're able to get it working again. But what if the thing itself is able to do its best to recover? And recover not just in terms of like resetting some software, recover in terms of moving to a better location, or, oh, I noticed I tipped over. I can, you know, it's a 30-minute round trip, you know, information back to Earth. I only have 20 minutes of battery, you know, whatever it ends up being. And so I'm making the executive decision. I'm going to try and push myself up. I see that as a win done right.
I'm there. All right.
Of course, that's one step away from HAL, where it has its own, you know, thoughts and things that it needs to try and accomplish and so on. HAL, or I guess like Prometheus, you know, at many of the Alien movies, frankly, Alien and Aliens. Yeah, I think I just talked myself out of it. Maybe we shouldn't do that.
All right. So, but you would take the taxi before you would take the trip to Mars, the autonomous taxi.
I think the odds of failure and the odds of being stranded very far from home are less with the robotaxi. Yeah.
Because they don't currently have a plan to get back, right? When you get up to Mars.
The robotaxis?
No, the travel to Mars.
Right. I wonder if, you know, speaking of like what's legal versus ethical or whatever when it comes to AI, what about on just the human side? Is it going to be legal to say we're going to send people to Mars and we know it's a one-way trip? I don't know. I
guess they're too afraid they might be smuggling fentanyl when you come back, which is apparently another
Space
job.
fentanyl.
Another job that AI is taking over. There was some controversy around the Border Patrol potentially deploying AI to detect fentanyl coming across the borders. It's a little misleading because what they really mean is analyzing X-rays potentially more efficiently than humans. Kind of the doctor angles. Yeah, we were talking about. Yes.
Yeah.
But I guess I don't have any problem with leveraging an AI model to analyze an X-ray as long as there's still a human in the loop. That's my only.
Sure, I don't want the automated turrets to come out and just riddle the car with holes as soon as it thinks you're a drug dealer. Let's have a person look over the results first. I think this is one of those clear divides of the technology is fine to use here because there are plenty of privacy invading cases. I think the EU just passed some regulations surrounding AI that like it shouldn't be able to. There's certain privacy like bounds that they're saying don't cross this.
Yeah.
And I agree. There should absolutely be bounds in my normal everyday life. I shouldn't have to worry about being wiretapped or having my face scanned just cause for whatever reason. Maybe it's useful someday. Like there has to be an actual reason behind it. I agree with all of that. If I'm at the border between countries and they're going to be taking X-rays of the car anyways, and they're taking the mirrors and showing it under the car to make sure no one's like strapped themselves under to get across. Yeah, send it through a machine learning thing to scan it faster. I've been stuck in long enough lines, like not even just from a selfish I want to get through faster perspective, but I literally can't find a downside to this unless it becomes the slippery slope of, and we'll just use that to scan everything all the time. Obviously, we don't want that. I'm saying
it's the slippery slope to that, and then it's the slippery slope to the precogs.
Yes, right. As long as I get to sit in the milk bath and, have the dreams and the marble comes down and everything.
But I think, that's the question of whether it's going too far or, is it a bridge too far? It's a mathematical model, but that's predicting whether you have brought fentanyl over. And what goes into this input? So is it only the X-ray, or is it also taking a look at your vehicle and the occupants of the vehicle and
race? Yeah.
Exactly. Does any of that? I don't know. I don't think it does at this point. I think it's just X-rays, but still, it's just the X-rays.
But what is it? Right. That becomes the question.
It's making a prediction. It doesn't know that that's fentanyl. Now, arguably, all the human, when they look at it, they're just making a prediction too. They're like, I think this matches my pattern for fentanyl that I've observed in the past, so I'm going to move forward. But there's something about removing the human from it and having a computer decide they're going to predict your future, and there are serious repercussions because of that future.
Again, it's not going to automatically destroy the car and its occupants. It should just be a automatic flag for, we're going to send you over to the enhanced security line. Is that different? And I'm going to make a an animal versus machine comparison here, but is it really that different when a dog sniffs your backpack and then sits down and, we have to take a look in your thing, versus a robot sniffer that has a machine learning model that detected the molecules of the so-and-so and says, I think there's fentanyl in that thing. It's
the dog's an interesting example.
Identify a thing.
I get the vibe that the dog is sometimes a BS indicator. Like the operator of the dog has the ability to make the dog trigger on something.
They want the dog to have found it there. Right. And so that's bias that's in a person as opposed to bias which can be programmed.
Right. So your argument is maybe it's even better than
the model.
Like we already accept
it's either better or
dog.
just as bad or worse. It's any of those, because it comes down to what's the bias you put into the model, whether you meant to or not. And will we ever completely get away from bias? Probably not. Hopefully people being aware of it and trying to fight against that can make that better.
Yet another AI taking our jobs, although, I don't know, this just seems like a small evolution, although some people are making it into something bigger. There's a new system called Devon that's come out from a company called Cognition, where the idea is that, or their posture is, they finally have recreated a full software engineer. I have not tested Devon, but historically, you can leverage a large language model to perform a small task associated with a software engineer, but you can't really give it anything of substantial breadth without having to manually review and adjust the code pretty substantially in order to get a working project. Very simple things, yes, but when it just becomes like anything more than just small complexity, there's a significant amount of rework that's required. Do you buy this?
I think so GitHub Copilot is something that a lot of people really, really enjoy using. There's plenty of things that say, people are such and such % more efficient when they're coding with Copilot. I think, just like you said, I'm in agreement that we're probably not at a point where it can really do whole projects. But if this company is saying, hey, we've got something that can do whole projects, that it seems like the logical next evolution of, I have something that can write code given sort of like small atomic tasks. All you sort of need is like a supervisor model beyond that of, it's self-aware, it might be self-aware, of the project scope and then how individual pieces work together. I think it's a very doable thing, having already seen what's doable. Now, I don't think we're going to get all of a software engineer, because we need people who can fight with project managers and program managers and misunderstand the requirements and waiting for requirements. I mean, like, that's absolutely going to be a human thing over AI for a long time. Purposeful misunderstanding, kingdom building, trying to obfuscate your code to keep your job. I don't see an AI replacing those anytime soon.
The first area where I see AI really replacing software engineers is when I buy the premise that if you can write a failing test, the AI can come in and get that test passing for you and submit a PR. I don't think PR means a pull request. Here's the change that fixes the bug that you've identified, or the feature. You could have a feature that you wanted to add, and you write a test that fails because the feature doesn't exist, and a test that will succeed. This is similar to the AI learning to play Goat Simulator 3, they could learn to play pass the programming test. It's just that the quality of the code that goes in there would likely be questionable. Not would likely be questionable, it would be questionable a high percentage of the time. But that concept that it finds a bug and it fixes the bug, I feel like we're close to that. But just taking like raw feature requests or what we might call a user story and implementing them from scratch, I don't think we're there yet. You've got to get really lucky in order for that to come together right now.
To be a little less flippant than I was previously being, I think more and more of this will keep getting automated to the point where a junior software engineer in certain types of the industry can be obviated. Case in point, you mentioned being able to do already small atomic things, maybe write some tests. Maybe we're at a point where we can do some bug fixes, depending on how good Devin is. We'll see. But from like a front end engineering perspective, being able to code in a new button or something, there's a billion examples of that. Surely give me the CSS and the HTML and, design a thing in Figma, whatever, to like, this is what a new button would look like. And I've integrated it into the right place in the code. We've got to be at that sort of point, if not now, really, really soon. So kind of back to the core concept of Devin, I would love to see it. I haven't actually looked too much into it yet. I will right after this. Maybe we'll have to have a follow-up. But if they haven't gotten it yet, they will. I really do think they will. And as someone who is a software engineer, a machine learning, whatever, do I literally fear for my own job? Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's coming for more and more of programmers. And it isn't going to be completely replacing people, but it's going to be less people needed to do the same amount of or more work. And that efficiency should, I think, lead to less people doing more, it should be the same number of people doing less work and getting the same pay. And, Bernie Sanders just introduced a bill for a 32-hour work week. I'll keep my fingers crossed, but, I think that should have social repercussions related to that. What I think is going to happen is companies don't have to keep as many people on staff to get the same.
In this, similar to the fentanyl that the machine alerts, but then the human verifies, I just have a hard time. I have a hard time seeing it get to the point where we just trust the AI to write all the code for us, and there isn't a very senior engineer sitting there and reviewing it all, because these are large companies, sometimes operating in regulatory spaces. But let's just assume it's not. You're just building the next social media platform, and you can kind of do.
You don't
whatever
want to
you
ship
want.
bugs. You don't want bad code going to production.
And I guess the answer is the AI, but who's going to debug those bugs? Because bugs will happen. So great, the AI shipped 10 features in a row. Now there's an issue, but no one really understands how it all works together. But I guess the point is that the AI understands, because the AI might just be self-aware.
There we go.
All right,
Hunter. It's been fun.
Yes, and I think we'll be back next week. In fact, I'll say it right now. We'll be back next week. I'm gonna use my AI model to predict whether or not, and it just said yes.
It always says
or we'll
yes.
be
It's
stuck
just
in the goat simulator. It's one of the two. We'll find out next week. All right. By the way, if you haven't, please subscribe. You can subscribe on YouTube. You can subscribe on Spotify, on iTunes, Google Podcasts, wherever you consume this material. Most likely there is a subscribe button, and if you click it, you will get more of this delivered directly to you, and it helps us steer the ship a little bit. So thank you. Thanks, Daniel. Talk soon.
They might be self-aware.